On this edition of The Fifth Estate, they boasted of delivering a superior education in a Christian setting. But what the students at Grenville Christian College got were decades of physical and emotional abuse.
The brainwashing was so effective, and of course the threat of violence, the constant threat of violence.
Then this group of former students and 1,400 others took the school to court and won.
It was a powerful day. The verdict itself is a stunning document.
Now, revelations made public for the first time.
There was a sleepover that was going to be held at Charles Farnsworth's house.
The headmaster's.
The headmaster's house.
New details about the link to an American cult.
Do you really think that there is some way of linking the two women in the Winnebago to apparent acts of abuse of students that occurred 700 miles away?
They're continuing to deny any connection to the Grenville Christian College, and it's absurd.
And incredibly, the role in it played by the man who is now the commander of the Canadian Armed Forces Chaplain School.
Mr. Mintz, we'd like to ask you a few questions, if that's all right. I'm Bob McEwen in Maitland, Ontario, where for decades the building behind me was known as Grenville Christian College, a place where many prominent and wealthy Canadians sent their sons and daughters to get a Christian education in what was known as a community of love. But then came the accusations of abuse, physical, psychological, emotional, and the mysterious role in it played by an American cult. And tonight we'll have much more for you that hasn't been reported. It's the story of a school run not on love, but on fear. This is The Fifth Estate. Today, it's a vacant building, but more than a decade after its doors closed, this school in Eastern Ontario still touches a nerve. A story?
Filming there recently, someone once connected to the school approached us.
What happened to them specifically?
Sexual abuse?
When? I don't know anything that's been corroborated by a witness or by anyone else. I only know of individuals who
is
made
that
this
not
up
the problem with sexual abuse, that it's usually not witnessed?
You guys don't seem to know the truth very well.
To know the truth, you have to go back almost 50 years to what went on behind these impressive stone walls on the banks of the St. Lawrence River.
It's the perfect setting for the kind of boarding school where the idle rich learn and play, but Grenville Christian College isn't like that.
From the start, there were signs Grenville Christian College was different.
We got together and said, let's begin to run our ship here with what we'll call tough love.
The school's headmaster in the 1970s explained his tough love philosophy to the CBC.
We have these great big schools with 2,000 kids in it. The alternative is the one-room schoolhouse, where you had a real mother there who cared for the kids, who spanked their bottoms when they were wrong.
Is that the way it is here?
That's the way it is here.
Tough, perhaps, but the school enjoyed a stellar reputation and the support of an Ontario who's who. Board members and patrons included a senator and 2 former lieutenant governors of the province. In 1995, Maclean's magazine published a flattering article. In it, a teacher named Gordon Mintz said he had never seen a more caring school. The author described the headmaster, Charles Farnsworth, as a warm Anglican priest with a down-home style. Farnsworth was an Anglican priest because the church made him one when it endorsed the school in 1977, flying the Anglican flag.
Charles Farnsworth was the headmaster of the school. He was our priest, and he was my parents' boss.
Grace Irving spent her entire childhood at the school, where her father was a teacher. She was one of what were called the staff kids.
I would imagine you're familiar with this term, light sessions, for instance, which was based on a belief that, a group of people would get together and you'd bring someone's sin or their struggles into the light.
Irving says those so-called light sessions often were led by Headmaster Farnsworth. More confrontation than therapy, they could involve almost everyone: teachers, students, rich kids, and staff kids.
There could often be yelling or screaming. These could go on at times for hours. They could turn physically abusive.
Some person does the beating, some person gets beaten. Then, they all switch roles, musical chairs. And it's like, that's the kind of light session-y thing. It's this weird, abusive situation.
Ewan White spent 3 years at Grenville Christian College in his early teens when his mother taught there.
There's lots of slapping. There was lots of, they'd beat the children with belts sometimes.
I mean, they were calling them things were terrible things.
Things such as?
They were seductresses, that they were, I mean, I don't even want to say some of the names.
Donna Robertson worked at the school for 3 decades, including as a guidance counselor. Now, speaking out for the first time, she's supporting former students who were also breaking their silence for this story.
I mean, I could cry when I think of what some of those young girls were subjected to. I was told that if I ever left, I'd be out on the street. I'd be out walking the street. My daughter, she told me that Charles told her if she ever left, within a year, she'd be an alcoholic and she'd be pregnant. Who says that to a kid?
Robertson's daughter, Dawn, was then another of the staff kids. Like many Grenville families, they had strong ties to the school: jobs, home, finances, faith, bonds hard to break. And among Grenville's core beliefs was that teachers knew how to parent the students better than their own families did.
My biggest sin was my idolatry towards my children. And at
Meaning
first,
what?
Meaning putting them in a place, setting them up in a place more higher than they deserved. Couldn't look over at.
For her sins as a parent, Donna was forced to live apart from her daughter, forbidden even to say hello. When Dawn turned 18, she moved away.
And I wanted to go through the door, and I was blocked from going outside that door. And I remember looking out the front window and seeing her get in a car. A friend had come to pick her up. And I can remember seeing her go, and honest to God, I can still feel it to this day. It literally broke my heart. I can still feel it to this day. It literally broke my heart.
In 2008, former Grenville students filed a class action lawsuit claiming the school had engaged in a system of excessive and abusive punishments. It was in court for over a decade. Then this.
Last week, an Ontario Superior Court judge ruled the school must pay damages to former students over the abuse they suffered at the school decades ago.
In February 2020, a sweeping victory for the students. On page after page, the judge affirmed essentially everything their class action suit had claimed, concluding the evidence of maltreatment and the varieties of abuse perpetrated on students' bodies and minds was class-wide and decades-wide.
I felt that the judge in this case really did understand the picture, the full picture.
But why would anyone, especially teachers and their families, agree to live in a situation like that, enduring abuse for decades? The answer may lie hundreds of kilometers away in Cape Cod, Massachusetts, at a place called the Community of Jesus.
The community is powerful. They have people in all kinds of positions in the town, you know. They have lots of people with money there. They have influence.
We don't call promiscuity today whoredom. I don't care what we call it, that's what it is. Whoredom.
On the shores of Cape Cod in Massachusetts is a place called the Community of Jesus. It's a controversial religious group founded in the 1960s by 2 women now known as the Mothers. Their stern sermons seen as coming straight from God.
Today we have a generation of whores, and some of them are your sons and daughters.
The Community of Jesus is a fellowship of Christian disciples called by our Lord Jesus Christ and dedicated to the honor of his name.
According to its website, the group was founded on love and obedience. About 275 members, some known as brothers and sisters, living in what's called a monastic community, then under the strict guidance of the two mothers. We went to Cape Cod recently to find out more about the community. Unlike Grenville Christian College, it's still operating. And it's where we connected with the Buddington family. Dan is a chef in a local restaurant. His mother Carrie and sister Ruth are visiting from out of town.
Most fun that I had with us as a family was one time when we were in trouble and they sent us to live in a small house by ourselves. And that Christmas was so much fun. But we were by ourselves, finally.
The three Buddingtons spent decades of their lives at the Community of Jesus. Carrie herself spent 41 years there, eventually becoming a sister who helped to run the community.
I soon learned that strict obedience means Kay and Judy were the voice of God. So what they said, you did.
The more power they got, the more they wielded it.
And along with the mother's power would come privilege and money.
We doted on them. The sisters prepared the meals, took care of their apartment, they were maids to them.
Vacations, travel?
Yeah.
They had a full-size pool, a Winnebago. They were always on vacations.
Their Cape Cod real estate is worth many millions of dollars, and members tie the percentage of their incomes to the church.
They also had a plane for a little while, and they had their own pilot.
They were always on vacation.
Yeah.
Carrie came to the community in her 20s, soon to be a young mother with a baby girl named Ruth. This next part may sound familiar.
So I got a visit one day from this woman and one of the head sisters with a message from Kay and Judy that they felt for her sake it'd be better if they took her away from me and had her live with somebody else. Just imagine how much pressure and fear it takes to stop me from being a mother.
Years later, at 13, Ruth tried to run away, but was returned to the community by the local police.
They didn't know what to do with me because the community is powerful. They have people in all kinds of positions in the town, you know. They have lots of people with money there. They have influence.
Ultimately, a family court judge became involved, and the Buddingtons say they were instructed to get counseling, specifically from outside the Community of Jesus.
In the meantime, Kay and Judy had given us the directive to pack up our suitcase, put the suitcase in the trunk. When we went to the last court hearing,
they made the order in the courthouse. I went and got in the car. The car had already been packed, and they drove me straight to Canada.
Straight to Canada, and to Grenville Christian College.
We all know that Kay and Judy ran GCC from a distance. Farnsworth was under their authority. There was a big connection, a strong connection.
I can still remember the first day when Kay and Judy came up that driveway in their Winnebago, and then everything went topsy-turvy.
Former Grenville employee Donna Robertson recalls when the mothers from the Community of Jesus first brought their unique brand of worship to Canada and the Grenville School.
Kay and Judy, how did they present themselves?
They were coming to fix us,
She says the mothers had been invited by Grenville leadership in 1973. Then the Community of Jesus returned the favor.
And the next thing we knew, they had hired buses, and we went down to the community, and we did not know what hit us. Like, everything was turned upside down. The thing that stands out to me most, all the ladies, we sat around in a garden, in a circle, in chairs, and if you had long hair, out came the scissors, and off came the hair.
Emotional and physical violence is just going to be part of your daily life, and that's it.
Former student Ewan White and his mother also lived on Cape Cod at the Community of Jesus before moving to Canada and the Grenville School. It's where he was first exposed to their abusive practices.
I had vomited at a meal, and they said, "You're going to eat it." An adult cult member there was pounding my head on the floor, was hitting me, and I'm scooping it up off the floor and I'm eating my own vomit. I think anyone looking at this would see it as severe child abuse. You know, I was pushed down the stairs. It's about 10. And these are the kind of people they were. This is the kind of discipline that you would get at the Community of Jesus towards small children.
Grenville Christian College apparently bought lots 13 and 14. So what the heck are they doing buying lots in the Community of Jesus?
Now in his 50s, White is a published writer and poet who's teamed up with University of Toronto professor Ruth Marshall.
The Community of Jesus, it's another grant, I guess, to Grenville Christian College. And so this one...
Together, they're digging for proof of the connection between the Ontario school and the controversial U.S. Christian group. The Community of Jesus appears to want to stay as far away as possible from the abuse allegations and the associated litigation.
I've looked into, for example, I've done all the forensic research, which is following the money is always the best advice.
First stop on the paper trail, a deed showing that Grenville Christian College had owned property and a house adjacent to the Community of Jesus. Then, this document. While the court said the board of directors had no formal control at Grenville, this shows leaders of the Community of Jesus were in fact corporate directors for the college, described as honored advisors. And in the 1989 college yearbook, then headmaster Charles Farnsworth states that without the Community of Jesus, the Grenville School would not exist today. Finally, there's this letter obtained by the Fifth Estate, written to the Anglican bishop in 2001 by a Grenville College administrator. The Community of Jesus saved us from closing up in the early 70s. From that time on, they played a very major role in the lives of the leaders of our community, and therefore a major role in how many things were done up here.
And I studied them, in the context of my course as a kind of mini totalitarian society.
Toronto professor Ruth Marshall has spent years studying the Community of Jesus and the source of its money and influence.
They managed to attract in very many numbers, actually, quite extraordinarily, a lot of trust fund babies.
Rockefeller.
Rockefeller heiress.
She's looked at how leaders at both places have kept students and followers in line.
In the Community of Jesus and the Grenville Christian College case, not only did they break from their non-believing families outside, but they also destroy family bonds within, so that children and parents don't live together. So this control over all the social relationships, that's what makes it a cult. It's about power and control.
I know you have a take. I happen to think it's grotesquely unfair and that it's hugely sloppy.
Boston attorney Jeffrey Robbins represents the Community of Jesus. He's adamant his clients have had no part in the systemic abuse the court in Canada found.
You've spoken to people who have been around and who say that Grenville took its direction from these two women who traveled up to Canada in a Winnebago. That seems hugely unlikely, but it's worse than that, because what you accuse them of is that you accuse these two women, and because they believe in Christian fellowship or whatever, that somehow acts over the course of a half-century of insulting people were at the direction of the Community of Jesus. It's preposterous. And frankly, it should be offensive to anybody who cares about fundamental fairness.
But what about the experiences described by Carrie and Ruth Buddington?
Between them, they spent 60-plus years at the Community of Jesus.
Okay, I actually...
They know about the Community of Jesus.
Oh, okay. So are we now saying that because, that Carrie Buddington or Ruth Buddington had a bad time at the Community of Jesus, that there were people who were abused in Grenville and that occurred because of the Community of Jesus? Surely you're not saying that.
No, I think the experiences Carrie and Ruth had at the Community of Jesus tell you a lot about the Community of Jesus. We're trying to develop a picture of what the Community of Jesus is.
You're trying to indict the Community of Jesus.
We're trying to establish what their various principles have
Sir,
been and what
sir,
practices they've used,
you're an awfully nice
and
guy.
how it affected real people.
You're an awfully nice guy, but not for a minute are you trying to explore this. You came down here trying to indict the community, and you will. I know it. Of course you will.
But in 2020, the Canadian judge in the class action lawsuit offered her own unequivocal indictment. She calls the separation of the two entities a false distinction. Quote, "There was ample evidence from the former staff and students to confirm that the Community of Jesus existed to run a school. The community was the physical and spiritual home to the school. Its values, practices, hierarchy, and beliefs were applied to the operations of the school. The two were interwoven." But while the Canadian case exposed much of what went on behind those stone walls, some secrets have stayed buried until now.
I also remember during the night that Charles Farnsworth came into the room. And I just remember, like, he had such a distinctive voice.
Honored guests, teachers, parents, fellow students, and graduates. Looking at the graduating class of 1997, I see some of the same faces I first met in preschool.
Michael Phelan was practically born at Grenville Christian College, where his parents were teachers. He was a student there until graduation in 1997, when he gave this commencement address.
Let us never lose sight of all that we have learned at Grenville, for it is the key to our future. Thank you.
That was quite a speech.
Wow. A lot of the speech, to be totally honest, I see it as a product of a lot of brainwashing, to be totally honest. Years and years and years of brainwashing.
A case in point. Here's Phelan playing to the camera in that Maclean's magazine article praising the school.
I mean, I think that's the thing that's really hard to explain about Grenville, is that all of this abuse that happened, everything that I experienced growing up, but also that it was the only thing that I knew.
As a young boy, it's where he learned about Headmaster Charles Farnsworth's approach to sex education and sexual abuse.
In that office, he gave a graphic description to all of us, maybe 15 of us in there, of when he was sexually abused by a camp counselor when he was younger. And he talked about that happening to him. And then he said at the end of it, if that happens to you, then it's your fault. That's your sin.
He says he tried to make the best of a bad situation, such as when the school imposed a grueling pre-dawn workout routine.
I believe it was my grade 9 year. They told us that we were going to be put on a boot camp and that we were going to be assigned different staff members who were going to be our parents. And the people that I was assigned to was the Mintzes, Gordon and Margaret.
Remember, Gordon Mintz is the teacher who told Maclean's he'd never seen a more caring school. Now, Michael Phelan saw another side of him.
I remember he had me get on the bike, and I just remember him just yelling at me like, harder, harder, harder. And I just remember, like, I just was so exhausted and I was in so much pain and I was so nauseous from the exercise that I went and vomited. And it was violent. It was violent vomiting. And I remember him clearly saying to me, the purpose of these sessions with me is to make you more of a man.
And that was a euphemism for what?
I was effeminate, and that in retrospect, they saw this as a one-way road to me being gay. And they were trying to do everything they could to beat that out of me.
It seemed pretty clear as I talked to people that a lot of the behavior would constitute emotional abuse.
Mike Morales was a local Brockville journalist who investigated Grenville Christian College in the 1980s.
It has been 18 years since I've seen any of this.
Decades later, Morales still has the files.
The more I dug, the more I found.
And the more he found, the more roadblocks he encountered. Threats from school staff, students warned to keep quiet.
That trickled down to the students by saying, there's a reporter, and if anybody talks to him, they'll be held to pay.
But Morales persisted, and 4 months later, he turned in a multi-part investigative series to his editor at the Brockville paper.
I believe I had a brief meeting, and the publisher said, we can't publish this. I think one of the concerns they had was about being sued, being a family-owned paper, and facing a big lawsuit.
I feel like there were probably opportunities where there were people from the outside community who maybe should have known something.
The Brockville journalist went to the church, went to the police, raised these questions.
And would that have been, do you know when that would have been?
1989.
1989.
So, all right.
Oh boy.
So reporter Mike Morales had blown the whistle on abuse at Grenville Christian College. Though his story never ran, he had alerted both the Ontario Provincial Police and a senior official with the Anglican Church, but he says neither expressed interest in what he had found. So there would be no criminal investigation. Michael Phelan had been keeping his own secrets for 3 years already.
There was a sleepover that was going to be held at Charles Farnsworth's house.
The headmaster's.
The headmaster's house.
Today, he's publicly revealing a painful detail for the first time.
We stayed in an upper room at that house. I remember like white carpet, I think. And in the night, Robert molested me and the other boy.
Robert, in this case, is Robert Farnsworth, adult son of Charles, the Grenville headmaster.
And I also remember during the night that Charles Farnsworth came into the room. And I just remember, like, he had such a distinctive voice, and I remember that voice just saying, Michael, Michael, over top of me. And I remember him fondling me as well. The other thing that I want to say about it, on at least one occasion, something was inserted in me. I remember that. And I remember that pain. And I've carried that pain with me my whole life.
And Phelan isn't alone in his allegations about the Farnsworth family.
I didn't want anyone to know that this had happened to me.
Grace Irving has her own memories.
I had been sexually abused by Charles Farnsworth as a child, as an elementary school age child.
The Farnsworth family denies the allegations of sexual abuse, against both Charles and his son Robert, saying they're untrue. It was Charles Farnsworth's other son, Don, who approached us as we filmed at the abandoned Christian college. He spent much of his life at Grenville as a student, teacher, and school administrator. He's also named as a defendant in the class action lawsuit.
And we have spoken directly to a number of people, multiple people who say that happened to them here.
What happened to them specifically?
Sexual abuse.
When? I don't know anything that's been corroborated by a witness or by anyone else. I only know of individuals who
is
made
that
this
not
up
the problem with sexual abuse, that it's usually not witnessed? It's usually done in secret or in private?
Usually someone would come and tell someone else, even though it might not be public, it would have come out.
So how then do you explain the fact that over 1,000, almost 1,500 students put their names on that lawsuit against Grenville Christian College?
They're not witnesses.
The people we have spoken to say that they don't expect to get any money. That's not why they did it. They did it so that they could right wrongs and have some form of justice, which, as many of them as young children, when they were here,
often stories like this start out with "once upon a time."
You don't believe in abuse, in systematic abuse?
I believe that systematic abuse is terrible, but I don't believe that happened here. There was no one here that had any intention of harming any child.
But we've learned that at least one senior Grenville staff member was indeed aware of the abuse allegations and shared her concerns with the Anglican Church.
This is shocking.
The Fifth Estate obtained this letter from a school administrator to the Anglican bishop, revealing Grace's description of being sexually abused by headmaster Charles Farnsworth.
They don't seem overly concerned about whether it might have been true. And then that it was shared with the bishop so many years ago.
And there's also this reference to Grace. What happens if this young lady goes to the police? The administrator asked the bishop. That will be devastating for Charles Farnsworth, she says. What if this opens the door to all the other accusations that have come our way? That letter was sent to the Anglican Church in 2001, 2 decades ago. In a statement to us, the Anglican Diocese of Ontario maintains a court decision found it had no duty of care in the Grenville case and found no evidence it had any direct involvement. But the church claims it didn't go to the police about those accusations against one of its own priests because the author of the letter disbelieved the allegations and never informed the bishop of the identity of the alleged victim. But why would any of that stop the church from contacting the police about serious allegations of sexual abuse?
Jurisdictionally, it's frankly a nightmare to try and, connect the dots between the Anglican Church. But there's clearly a great deal of complicity, but there's clearly a moral and ethical responsibility.
7 months after receiving that letter, the Anglican Church ordained yet another Grenville headmaster as a priest, former longtime teacher, Gordon Mintz.
He was there through some pretty horrendous psychological, physical abuse of children, and there's no way he can say he didn't know what was going on.
And you may not guess where we recently caught up with him, at Canadian Forces Base Borden, where he's now Lieutenant Colonel Mintz.
Mr. Mintz,
yes,
we'd like to
I'm happy to
ask you a few questions, if that's all right.
We know that it is a privilege for us to carry on a mission that has existed here on this property since 1917.
This is Gordon Mintz, headmaster of Grenville Christian College, before it closed in 2007.
He was there through some pretty horrendous psychological, physical abuse of children, and there's no way he can say he didn't know what was going on.
Rebecca Sangster attended Grenville for high school. She followed the class action lawsuit closely, including the day Gordon Mintz testified against his former students.
In the class action lawsuit, he still defended the school. He still defended the faith, which to my mind means that he's still a member of the cult.
The lawsuit covers the period before Mintz became headmaster, but includes his time as a teacher there, just over a decade in all. In court, he was never questioned about sexual abuse, nor was he personally named in the lawsuit. But as a witness, he repeatedly denied any knowledge of physical or emotional abuse, which the judge had concluded was then widespread at his school. Today, Rebecca Sangster is a civilian employee of the Canadian Armed Forces.
And that's when I saw that Gordon Mintz was a padre in the Canadian military.
In 2019, she learned Mintz was not only a military chaplain, but that he'd been promoted to Lieutenant Colonel in command of the Canadian Armed Forces Chaplain School.
Somebody eventually said, why don't you just email the Major General Chapdelaine, the head padre, directly? So that's what I did. I sent him a letter saying, this is who you are now promoting to the headmastership of the Padre school that teaches all of the other Padres. You know, are you aware of this, and can you please look into this?
At the time of Sangster's approach, as recently, the military was under pressure following a series of poor decisions in its mishandling of sexual assault allegations. She hoped her concerns would be taken seriously. Indeed, the very next day she received an apparently urgent reply from the chaplain general. He wrote he had not been made aware of the issues. The content is most concerning. The forces will take this seriously. And an investigation has been initiated. It has now been more than 2 years since Rebecca Sangster's email, and she's had no further response. We caught up with Lieutenant Colonel Gordon Mintz recently on his way into work at the Chaplain School in Borden, Ontario.
Mr. Mintz.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Bob McEwen from the Fifth Estate at CBC News. We'd like to
I'm happy to
ask you a few questions, if that's all right. We'd like to ask you about...
Can you give me your contact information, and I'll be happy to...
I think you may have it. We'd like to ask you about allegations of abuse at Grenville School when you were a teacher there. In court and in interviews, you've denied there was any abuse.
Contact information for the public.
The judge found it was a systemic abuse, physical, mental, emotional. Is there anything you'd like to say to the people like Michael and Rebecca to whom we've been talking?
A follow-up statement from the Canadian Forces confirmed they are aware of the concerns raised about Gordon Mintz and take them very seriously. But the military points out he has never faced any disciplinary action in his current job, and a recent investigation found no irregularities. In 2007, when abuse allegations at Grenville became big news, the Ontario Provincial Police did eventually launch an investigation. But in the end, the same police force accused of ignoring information about abuse nearly 20 years earlier once again declined to press charges.
The fact that the same branch of the police would be allowed to do an investigation is shocking. Absolutely shocking.
After an inquiry from the Fifth Estate, the OPP says the case is now under review.
Who do you blame for that? Is that an institutional failure? The church, the regulatory agencies, the police, individuals? Who?
I think it's probably a mixture of all of the above.
But so far, accountability has been hard to find. No apology from the police, or the Anglican Church, or from former headmaster Gordon Mintz, nor from the family or estate of former headmaster Charles Farnsworth, either before or after he died in 2015.
I think it would be helpful for me and for many people if we felt like there were people taking accountability for what happened, if people were taking responsibility. I think that would help. And at the same time, I think some of some of the damage is kind of irreversible.
You can use your voice now, which you couldn't for 36 years, you know?
Which I didn't, and I wish I had of, but I didn't, and that's all there is to it.
One of the few who has apologized is Donna Robertson, former Grenville employee and victim, forced apart from her daughter. She recently posted a note to students on Facebook saying, "I am very ashamed of my part in being complicit and not speaking up. I am truly sorry."
Yeah, I've apologized and apologized, and a part of me thinks I can never apologize enough. But as my daughter keeps telling me, I cannot beat myself over the head till the day I die. I have to, you know, she used to say, "Let it go, Mom, let it go, let it go."
And what is your relationship with Dawn after all of this?
I consider her one of my best friends. I'm really glad you were there for me.
Love you, Mom. Love you too.
Ruth Buddington reconnected with her mother when Carrie finally left the Community of Jesus after 41 years there. By that time, Judy and Kay, the so-called mothers, had both already passed away.
We've told each other our stories, we've listened to each other, we've heard each other's perspectives. Yeah.
Survivors.
Yeah. Yeah.
Today, Ewan White is back where it started, visiting the ghosts of his past at the long-shuttered Grenville School.
I want it to be known what they did here, and I would like for this type of thing not to happen again.
He says his biggest concern is that children still at the Community of Jesus now will be better protected than he was then.
My whole childhood, I was all on my own. I've never recovered. I've never, you know. But I think, you know, somebody should do something for these kids so they can have a chance.
White and Professor Ruth Marshall are writing a book they hope will shine a light on the link between the Community of Jesus and what happened at Grenville Christian College. And for everyone who experienced what they now call the cults of Grenville Christian College and the Community of Jesus, Michael Phelan has some words of advice.
I think I'd say you don't see a way out now. But it's there. You don't see it, but it's there. And it's going to be really hard, but you'll make it. And they're not going to win. So just hold on.
If you have a story you think needs to be told, send us your tips at fifthtips@cbc.ca. And for a more confidential way to contact us, visit our website at cbc.ca/fifth and click on Secure Drop.
I'm Mark Kelly.
Today, we are starting action.
From a feel-good charity
We are weeded.
to a full-blown controversy.
I feel like my son was the victim of fraud.
Millions were raised for kids in Kenya.
All the money that was collected for this village, it doesn't add up.
Let's go. We need to go. And now insiders reveal what the charity tried to keep quiet.
Why are you concerned about protecting your identity? What are you afraid of?
At the end, I've been deceived.
That's coming soon on The Fifth Estate. For more about our investigations, sign up to get The Fifth Estate's weekly newsletter. We'll keep you posted on stories we've brought you and share some behind-the-scenes details. Head to our website, cbc.ca/fifth, and subscribe there.